Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the Enki Jazz podcast, featuring my interview with the fantastic trumpeter Andre Canniere. Andre was due to be playing at the Manchester Jazz Festival for us this year, touring his new album Ghost Days. Sadly, of course, the festival could not take place this year, but we hope to have Andre back at some point in the near future. In the meantime, please sit back and enjoy the interview with Andre. Hello and welcome, Andre, to the Enki Jazz podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time out to join us. How's lockdown? How's isolation? What are you finding yourself doing these days?
I guess it's kind of similar to a lot of people in my position, trying to maintain some sort of sense of normality. I've still got my teaching, trying to keep up the motivation to practice, even though all the gigs have been wiped away. Trying to stay sane with my family, balancing work and all that stuff with a bit of homeschooling. Yeah, it's been interesting. But we're still all here. No one's been kicked out of the house yet. So I suppose that's a good thing. Good start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a massive divide between people who are locked at home with children and those without children.
Yeah.
I think that the productivity levels of the ones without children are managing to sail a bit higher. But
well, that is what I said at the beginning. I mean, I don't like to sort of divide and between sort of people with kids and without, but I did say, as at the beginning, I look forward to seeing the results of the post lockdown from all those musicians and artists without children in their house. So all the symphonies and huge projects they've got lined up.
79 full album transcriptions and all
yeah,
for
sure.
So listen, I wanted to delve back a little bit, because obviously people may well have already clocked you're not a native of the British Isles. You've come and joined us from sort of rural Philadelphia. Is that what I read?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. So sorry. Yeah.
That's right. Philadelphia's not rural. That's the.
Well, that's what. I was confused.
The largest city in the state, but you made the connection there, so that's good.
You headed to New York for 5 years. You were living and working in New York.
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
Yeah, and then what brought about the decision to move to the UK, to move to London? Why, of all of the places in the world you may have moved to, especially from New York, and you by all accounts were playing with some great musicians and doing some great things over there. So how come that all came about? And obviously we're happy to have you here.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I was having a great time in New York. I was playing with some great bands. I played with Maria Schneider's band. I was doing Darcy James Argue's big band. Some fantastic stuff. I was really enjoying it. It's not like I wasn't enjoying it there, but well, my wife is British and she's from here, and she was working over there at the time, and the company she works for had asked her to come back, and I just thought, I'll go with you, check out the scene there. I really didn't plan on staying or know if I was going to stay, but here we are 12 years later.
Well, great. Yeah. I mean, that's a big positive for the UK scene. You obviously like it at least.
Yeah.
And how does it compare in terms of obviously the cities themselves have their own atmospheres and cultures and whatever, but musically, how have you found making a career in one place or another, both in terms of maybe the type of work, the availability of work, the type of people, where did you enjoy, or where do you enjoy, and what are the pros and cons of both? Because a lot of people, I think, have this maybe over idealized view of New York as the mecca for jazz or whatever.
Yeah, I think starting from that point, I think that's really true, especially now. I think because of the last maybe 10 years or so, with this connection that people have via Instagram, YouTube, etc., I think there's been kind of like a globalization of jazz and artists, where it's a lot easier to see what's going on in the scene somewhere else in the world. Whereas I think, that's good and bad. I mean, I guess it kind of maybe changes the dynamic a little bit. Like, you know, maybe a certain city would have had a really, really kind of unique sound within their scene, which maybe that's going a bit because people are checking out people online and, you know, this and that.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of a really interesting point about the difference. But I mean, when I moved here, I mean, first of all, when I moved to New York, it was kind of an easy transition because I moved there straight out of college, and I went at the same time with a lot of my friends and peers from college. So I kind of went there. I was American. I was in an American city. Musicians, I knew loads of musicians. It was fairly easy to kind of just get into the scene without. I mean, you know, you had to do a bit of work, but it just kind of seemed to happen over a couple of years. Whereas when I moved here, it was really not that way at all, because I had no connection to the, you know, to London, to any of the colleges here. I didn't know any musicians. So it took a lot of getting out there and just really getting to know people and see what was what and who was doing what. And I mean, and that was really great, actually. I think that was good for me in terms of how I was able to kind of jumpstart my career here, is because I had to be really proactive. And I think the main difference about the two places that I kind of noticed from the beginning was obviously, and I think everyone's I think says this, and anyone who's been to both places, and it's a fairly obvious point, but New York is very compact, if you know what I mean. Like it's built up instead of out. So I think it was the scene, the being kind of close to other musicians was a lot easier. Whereas I think London is just really spread out. So I think there's little pockets of scenes throughout the city. But I mean, I live probably in one of the least jazz infected neighborhoods in London. I mean, I'm near, you know, southwest London, Richmond, and I mean, there aren't that many musicians. There's a few, but there aren't that many musicians near me. And when I need to go and play, I mean, a lot of the venues that I play at in London are like the Vortex. You know, that's completely the other side of town.
Sure, yeah.
It's a good trek to get there. So I think that it doesn't feel like it's the scene is as kind of connected all the time.
Sure. As in, like, in New York, would you easily be able to like make it to a few gigs at different venues a night and just
absolutely. I mean, I can remember, and also, I mean, there's a different culture, I guess, of venues being open really late in New York. So I do remember having a gig that I would finish and then pack up my stuff and take the subway a couple of stops somewhere else, get out and go see someone else's gig. And, you know, you could probably see another gig after that, because places like Tonic, which isn't there anymore, as far as I'm aware, is you know, they would have shows going until 4 a.m. So it was a slightly different scene in that way.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love it if London did that once in a while. Oh, I mean, God forbid if Manchester should have some venues running late. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only equivalent is like Ronnie Scott's doing the kind of late jams. But in New York, when a show was when a venue was running until 4 a.m., it was actual bands playing their music. You know, so you'd go at 2 a.m. to hear Kneebody, and not just like a house band with, you know, a bunch of students getting up to play.
Yeah, absolutely. So having moved to London and then, you know, establishing yourself, who were some of the first like strong musical connections you made? Because, you know, you went on to record then with Henrik Jensen, did two, maybe even 3 albums with Henrik, but at least 2 that can think.
Two. A couple of tours. Yeah. Well, the first musicians that I really worked with when I got here, it was kind of a weird mix of musicians, because it was based on people that I knew and connections that I had, and it just so I remember, I think the Chris Vadalero, who's not really that well known on the jazz scene, but he's an amazing drummer. He's American. He went to Eastman, which is where I went to college, so I had that connection. He lives in the UK, and he's mostly doing stuff like he was doing Imogen Heap's band and Bat for Lashes and Sam Amadon. So he's kind of really in that world of interesting singer-songwriter bands, and amazing drummer. He did my first album on Whirlwind, Forward Space. He did half of that, where John Scott did the other half. And I think we did maybe one or two gigs where he played, but yeah. So it was Chris Vadalero, and one of the first gigs I did in the UK, I had Jasper Hoiby on bass, and I think then I met Hannes Riepler, the guitar player, who now he's been on the scene in London at least as long as I have, longer, I guess, because I met him when I got here. But he's doing great things. He's run quite a lot of successful jam nights, sort of original music followed by jam, that kind of thing in London. So Hannes, and then Mark Hanslip.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah. He was in London. He was actually. So I remembered Mark from the summer before I moved to the UK officially. I came to visit for about 6 weeks because that was about as long as you could stay legally. So I came to check it out and just spend a summer here. And I went to a few gigs. And I remember there was a gig I went to in Brick Lane at some venue. I can't remember now, but it was Mark Hanslip and Tim Giles. Yeah. And I can't remember who else was in it, but I remember thinking, okay, I couldn't remember the names when I got in, but I remember what they looked like. And then I can't remember how I met Mark. I know what it was. I did a recording session for Rian Voslu, did a recording session, and Mark was on that session, and I said, I know you. I saw you, last summer when I was visiting, and so we got chatting. So my first band here was Hannes on guitar, Mark on saxophone, and then John Scott. I think I heard him. I think I went to the Con Cellar Bar because I was hanging out there a lot, and I think I heard him play with a couple of bands there, and I liked his playing, so I got him involved as well. So, and the same with Ryan Treblecock, who was in that first band, and they so we did a couple of gigs, but then I kind of slightly changed the instrumentation. So instead of guitar saxophone, I made it guitar piano, and then so I got George Fogel on, and so that was the official first band iteration. We did Forward Space, and then George left town, and Ivo took over, Ivo Neem, for the second album, Coalescence, and then then it was on to The Darkening Blue, which was kind of a mixture of that band and the band I've got now. So I've brought Brigitte and Tori in. Yeah. But Ivo was still in, and actually Mike Janish was on bass, and this American drummer Ted Poor, who I brought in.
Right. Okay. Because I have to say I didn't recognize Ted's name when I was looking through, but he's not based in the UK. Then
no, he's not. But he's incredible drummer, amazing musician. I went to college with him as well, and he was in New York for a while. He moved there when I did, and he spent his time there playing with Ben Monder and Kung Wu and Kurt Rosenwinter. He was sort of big. Everyone loved his playing. He was playing with everyone, anyone he wanted to, really. And then he went out. He's been based out in Seattle, somewhere in the West Coast of America, and he's now doing quite a lot of like bluegrass. He's done. Do you know this mandolin player Chris Thiele, who's got like a a show that he runs on and he's got him involved in that. So he's been doing some stuff like that. It's really, really cool. But yeah, so I just wanted to do an album properly with him because he was one of my favorite players, one of my favorite drummers that I kind of grew up musically with.
I'm really glad to hear that you had a good connection with Mark. He because he moved up to Manchester, I don't know, maybe around Manchester about 6 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And you know, Manchester doesn't have a huge jazz scene, and there's a handful of sax players knocking about who are, you know, sort of jazz musicians. And then Mark turned up, and it was just such a like massive breath of fresh air to just have Mark around on gigs.
Yeah.
And he also came. So before we were running gigs at the Whiskey Jar, we had a venue called the Wonder Inn. There was a bizarre and you know, it was one of those warehouse spaces that every week seemed to be a different building when you re-enter.
I think I played there with Entropy.
Oh, right. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
It's funny, I remember that only because that someone just stuck up a video link of that gig, and they said the Wonder Inn, I think it was. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that was.
It was at the Wonder Inn, but I think the thing with that was, I think it might not have been one of the nights we were running, actually. I think it might have been a separate night there. But because Dee came and guested with the Manchester Jazz Collective, which is a 10-piece band that I run, and she brought some Entropy music and blew it up for 7 horns, and it was a lot of fun.
Right.
Yeah. So but Peter Fay's the gentleman who will have taken that video.
Yeah.
And
that's the one.
The story I was about to say, well, not much of a story, but Mark just came back into my head the other day because Peter also shared a video. He's been delving into his archives. He's an avid gig goer, and he put up a video of Ollie Bryce's quintet with Mark sitting in guesting, as George Crowley, Mike Fletcher, Alex Bonney, Jeff Williams, and just this. I remember being absolutely overwhelmed watching that gig at the time. It was one of the first really serious, heavy bands that had come and played at the night, and I just remember being absolutely swamped by it. And then Mark got up and just joined for a couple of tunes, and his playing was just I remember it was absolutely stunningly beautiful, and then it was just perfect.
Yeah, he's a really beautiful, deep player, and I really that was one of the things I really remember about him when I first met him, and we played together for a little while. I remember we used to talk about Rich Perry. He's one of those sax players who not many people know about, but he's I think probably seriously underrated. But just sort of sharing that sort of stuff was interesting and fun.
Yeah, deep guy. But he's he left Manchester again for because he's doing a PhD in York, I think so.
Oh, wow.
I haven't seen so much of him the last while, which is a shame. But hope to catch him again soon. But so listen, on to the Darkening Blue then. So you've got 4 albums out now on with Whirlwind. So that's a long-running relationship. But the first 2, as you say, were both instrumental. And then for your 3rd album, for the Darkening Blue, you brought Brigitte. And was that the first time you'd written specifically with lyrics? For that project.
Yes, I mean, I tried. It was just something I'd always wanted to do. I think I was inspired by one of the Dave Douglas albums, which had this Aoife O'Donovan singing on it. What was it called? Dave Douglas. Be Still. That was the album. And I just thought it was such a good vibe, and I'd always wanted to have a kind of a singer-songwriter thing going on in my band. Is I always felt like, especially at that point in my writing journey, that I was thinking of writing music more in like songs, and I thought it would be great to try that. And so what I guess the initial thing is that, and the Darkening Blue started from the connection to poetry that I had, and I thought this is a great place to put that together, because I tried writing some words myself, and it just I couldn't do it. I mean, I wasn't happy with anything that I put out. Was just,
I mean, this is it. People spend their lifetime crafting just that aspect.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
I certainly haven't delved into that.
I mean, it gave me so much more respect for people who write words, and especially artists who write and sing their own words. I just I think it's such an amazing thing, and I have so much respect for people that can do that.
For sure.
Maybe one day I'll be able to do that, but at the moment I'm just enjoying using other people's words.
Yeah, I can't wait for the Andre Canniere vocal album. That's what we're all waiting
Yeah,
for.
yeah. I do like singing, but again, it's one of those things that to actually do it officially. I mean, I guess recording it would be one step, but then being expected to go out and do it live, that I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
Well, so I wanted to ask as well, so like you say, the connection to poetry is the big motivator with the lyrics and the spirit of this album, but it's one poet in particular, is that right? Rainer Maria Rilke, is that?
Yeah, well, and Bukowski.
Okay.
So there were two. I essentially just I didn't know a lot about poetry, but I just I was fans of both of those writers, and so I just thought I picked some of my favorite works of theirs, and that was the basis of that album.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm not a huge poetry aficionado. I'm a big fan of James Fenton and
Okay.
Odds and ends here and there, but I'm not familiar with either of those. So for myself and anyone listening who's as uneducated as as I am, would you mind giving us a bit of background on the two of those?
I'll start with Rilke. I got introduced to him in a really funny way. It was when I was back in my college days, when I was checking out a lot more classical and contemporary music in that style. I was a big Shostakovich fan, still am, and there's one of the later symphonies, number 14, I believe, which is for soprano and bass soloists with strings and percussion, and it's quite out there, and it's really deep, and there's I can't remember how many movements now, but it's like something like 12 movements.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look at it, but every movement has the text is taken from a different writer, and one of them was a Rilke poem, and it was really short, and it was his poem about death, and it's just really short, and it was so deep and just so hit me, and it was really dark, and I just throughout my life I've always been a fan of all things dark, so I don't know why. I'm not a dark person, but like when I read, when I watch TV and films, and when I listen to music, I'm just drawn to dark things. I don't know why, but so that poem really hit me hard, and so that I got a book of his poetry, and obviously he's Austrian, so I had to get the English translation, and I got supposedly the best translation, which is by Stephen Mitchell, and so I got reading. So the interesting thing about Rilke is that his later stuff is very dark. So that poem was a bit later in his career, and but a lot of his earlier stuff was a bit more kind of mystical and less. So there was less dark, and it was more like that. And that's actually what this, oddly, those are the poems that I chose for the Darkening Blue. So they're like Autumn Day, Going Blind. They're a bit more kind of ethereal, and there's not so much of that darkness that comes later in his career. And so then the other one, Bukowski, I was just a big fan of Bukowski as an author. I don't know if you've read any of his books.
I haven't.
Ham on Rye, Post Office, Factotum, and it's great. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I wasn't aware so much. I knew that he had written poetry, but I wasn't aware how much. And not being, a dedicated poetry fan, I didn't really have any interest in checking it out until a friend of mine sent me the poem of his called Bluebird, and there's an interesting video on YouTube of some guy reading it, and I can't remember his name, but he has a voice very similar to what you would imagine Bukowski sounding like. It's a bit gruff, sort of he just, it's really well read, and I mean that one hit me really hard, and it's a beautiful poem. I don't know if you've read it or if you're aware of it.
No.
It's kind of it's essentially it's to sum it up as best I can. It's kind of about a man who has he's trying to kind of, his outside persona is tough guy. Nothing bothers him. You know, he can deal with anything. But that he's got this bluebird in his heart that likes to sing to him at night, and you know, but he has to keep it hidden away. He doesn't want anyone to know about it. So he's like, it's a beautiful poem, and so that was the first one. I actually wrote the song Bluebird from that album using that poem. And I really wanted to use that poem. I contacted the Bukowski estate, and after many months of not getting a response, I finally got a response from Linda Lee Bukowski, his widow, which was like, you know, pretty amazing to get someone, you know, you admire, and just to get a response directly from, like, that's as close as you can get to Bukowski now. Yeah. But sadly, the answer was no, because and this, who knows whether it would have been another answer if I hadn't tampered with it. But essentially what I had done is I tweaked like 2 or 3 words, like hardly anything at all, but I just tweaked 2 or 3 words to fit into a melody that I'd written.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently that what she had said was that according to his final wishes, his poetry couldn't be tampered with.
Sure.
Couldn't be used for anything but as it had, you know, how it was written. And so unfortunately I wasn't allowed to use that. So, and I'd already done the recording. We'd been out to the studio, recorded it. So it was a big panicky moment for me. But what I did is my sister is she's always been quite a writer. She writes a lot of prose, a lot of poetry. And I so I just got in touch with her, and I said, I told her the story. I said, how would you like to write something using the sentiment of this poem? So I sent her the poem, and said, I just want you to capture that feeling, and here's the melody. So she did an amazing job of kind of rewriting the poem, but in her own words. And so that's what's sung on the album. But when we do it live, we oftentimes revert back to the Bukowski poem.
Well, maybe as a bit of interest for any watchers, we'll put both in the text below the video. People can have a read and a check out. That's I had a similar experience. Not well for copyright issues, but not for a recording. I was a massive Brecker head when I was doing my undergrad degree, and I wanted to do one of the quintet charts for my undergraduate recital and get, you know, the sort of chamber orchestra vibe. But obviously they're not published, so I transcribed the chart, but needed permission because it was quite, you know, it's obviously a formal assessment. You need copyright permission to be able to do it even as a transcription. So I got in touch with the Brecker estate and whatever, and ended up getting an email back from Susan Brecker saying, you know, obviously, you know, you're more than welcome and whatever. But that was, that similar thing of just feeling that close connection to someone and going, they're real.
I still have the email. Even though it wasn't the answer I wanted, it was still pretty cool.
Yeah. But yeah, so I feel like now is a great time to have a listen to the first track. So we're going to play a track from the new album, which we'll talk about after we've taken a listen. But your latest album, Ghost Days, only came out, is it last month or was it the month before now?
Oh, time has disappeared, hasn't it? I don't know what month it is, but it came out mid-February.
Oh right, that feels like about 2 weeks ago at this stage.
I even brought the you know, this is the first album I've ever done on vinyl, and it's not just vinyl, but it's red vinyl.
Oh so, wow, gorgeous.
That's kind of the thing about it. It's pretty cool. But yeah, there it is.
Well, let's have a listen to the first track. So you picked out Colours for us. Is this the first track off the album?
No, it's actually the second track on the album.
But it's the one that I've been hearing on bits of promo and knocking about quite a lot. So let's take a listen, and then we'll have more of a chat. This is Colours from Ghost Days.
Transgress. I feel you and me like a blade. We wake to days that have no shade. Our heads sit heavy on our shoulders. If there were colors, if there were lights, we would call this, the world would call this a sin. Monochrome movie is out of date. Wait, thin white paint on thin white paper. Our choked up ghost days spent in bed are no threat to the colors of modern love. If there were colors, if there were lights, we would call this, the world would call this a sin, a sin. If there were colors, if there were lights, we would call this, the world would call
So great. So that was Colours from Ghost Days. So as we were just saying before, Ghost Days came out in February, and obviously sadly the tour that would have been supporting the release of the album was set to be over the few weeks at the moment. So massive, condolences on the loss of tour and all of that. But
Yeah.
obviously we're massively looking forward to having you back as soon as we can, as soon as it's safe to do so, and all of that. But obviously, with this album now, you've kept Brigitte, and you've decided to carry on with another vocal album, and not return to the instrumental thing. So obviously, things worked out well the first time.
Yeah.
And again, inspired by some poetry as well, but this time, well, obviously, talk me through it. But working in relationship with the poets, is that the situation?
Yeah. I mean, well, I guess the reason that I kept the band kind of going and did another album was, so we had, with the Darkening Blue, that was done. That was kind of like a studio album. We didn't really do much touring before that, so everything was written, and we just kind of had a few rehearsals. I think we did maybe one gig before that, the Vortex, but we recorded the album and then we toured it, and we did the first sort of big album tour, and then we did another UK tour the following year, and it was just at that point where you start realizing that the music is sounding so good, and you're kind of wishing, wow, I wish I could record this all again. So in that respect, I thought, I then decided, right, for the next album, I'm going to write the music first, we're going to tour it, and then I'm going to record it. So that's what we did. And I think it's just, I found working with this band, with this group of musicians, it's just, they're musically amazing to work with, incredible. But we get along. It's socially, it's a lot of fun. The tours and the hangs, and the kind of the food obsession with Tori, and so that's what we did. So we did I then did another tour in 2018, where the goal was to sort of write the music that I wanted to record for Ghost Days, and to tour it, and so we did that. So by the time we ended up recording it at the end of 2018, it felt really good. It felt solid. Like, when you tour the music, it's like an organic thing. What you wrote to begin with becomes almost sometimes something completely different, and you get the input of everyone in the band, kind of saying, oh, we could do this here and this, that, just makes it. It's just, I feel like it's a lot stronger, and it felt incredible being in the studio, just being able to kind of just play everything, and not have question like, what are we going to do in this section? What are the horns doing here? We couldn't quite work that out. Everything's worked out down to a T. I mean, essentially, when we got to the studio, we were just playing another gig. Yeah. So it was cool, and in fact, the last track on the CD is it's the only instrumental one in the album. But it's just something I wrote the day before we went in the studio.
Old school.
And exactly. And I just sort of thought about it. I was like, this is what Miles and Coltrane used to do. They'd write charts and bring them in this, hand them out on the day of the session. And that was a lot of fun, and it worked out really well. They got the vibe that I wanted straight away. So we, played through it and then pressed record, one take. And that was it. Yeah. So with but then going back to the poetry, and it's been a nice process as well to be collaborating with living, working poets and writers, where I can kind of bounce ideas back and forth, as opposed to just using poetry from people that have died, and it's all down to you. Whereas, I mean, they Malika and Rebecca literally gave me complete freedom to do whatever I wanted. In fact, I remember talking to Malika Booker on the phone and saying, I mean, do you have any preference as to which poems I use, or do you want to like come to a gig? Do you want to should I send you what I've written to see if you're happy with it? And she said, no, you just do whatever you want. It's fine. It's like, wow, okay. But the option was there anyway if I wanted it to collaborate, bounce ideas off of them.
Great, yeah. And what made you pick those two poets?
It was just a bit random, really. I mean, I think I met Rebecca, and she just sent me some stuff, and there were some other people that had sent me some stuff as well, because I'd basically just been talking to people along the lines and saying that I was interested in doing this, and so I probably had 3 or 4 people that had written some stuff, but in the end you can't use it all, and I just sort of narrowed it down. I just chose the stuff that resonated with me the most. It wasn't like I thought someone's work wasn't good enough to use. It's just that I particularly the words that they wrote just happened to really resonate with me, and so that's I guess how it all happened. And with Malika, I Googled. I was trying to figure out who, I was trying to find someone, because again, even after having done Darkening Blue, I still felt like I didn't really know that much about poetry. So I had to do a bit of research to find out who's kind of current on the UK scene. And I think her name kind of came up first. So she has a book out called Pepper Seed, which is where all these poems came from. So I got the book and just picked a couple. There's so many good ones. And in some ways it was hard to narrow it down, but I did have to. Yeah.
Can't fit a whole book on one album.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and having gone through the experience of writing for Darkening Blue and using poetry, did you feel like you were coming at it from quite a different perspective writing Ghost Days, or was it still, without it meaning to sound like a struggle anyway, but were you still grappling with certain things? Did it still feel very much like something new and different, or do you feel like I sort of inhabit the space of words and lyrics and all of this a bit more comfortably now?
Oh, it definitely felt more comfortable. I think, for 2 reasons. One is the obvious one, I think, which is that with the first project, I was struggling to figure out how to put words, and especially something that comes from a poem, which kind of has its own rhythm already, to then put it to music. And I didn't necessarily choose. This is what a lot of people said to me. Is like, oh, Rilke, you didn't give yourself much of a what's the word?
An easy ride.
I didn't take the easy route out there, and that was certainly true. And I think I did struggle, and there's probably some stuff. If I were to be honest with myself, listening to Darkening Blue, and some of the ways in which I had written the melodies and put the words together, some of it maybe sounds a little bit awkward to me now, but with Ghost Days, I think so. It was the experience of having done it, but I think secondly, it was that I think the words and the prose are more. They're in a kind of more modern language, and it felt, especially Rebecca's words, they felt almost a bit more like song lyrics. So I think they kind of, for me, it was really easy to just read through them and just immediately almost started singing a melody, with the words. So it felt definitely a lot more natural and easy this time around.
Yeah, great. Well, let's have another listen then. Let's delve in. This is another track off Ghost Days that you've picked out, and this one's called Erasure. Could you tell us a little bit about this track, please?
Yeah, so this is one of Malika's poems, and I didn't actually use the words in such a way, like I did on the others. So I just used the kind of the content and the meaning of the poem to inspire the music. And Brigitte does sort of pick out a few words. She's got, this is a great feature for Brigitte, and in her solo, she sort of picks out a few words and places them in there. But yeah, the beginning line of the poem is "This is no elegy," and that's how I got the rhythm of the first sort of melodic line. So it's just "This is no elegy." So that's, that was just a really basic way of kind of starting the melody for me, and then it kind of went from there. Yeah.
Beautiful. Sit back and enjoy Erasure.
For such as you. Hey, hey, there was no grief. You are my silence.
Great. So that was Erasure, and obviously go and check out the full album out now on Bandcamp and all of the rest. One thing I meant to ask you just before was when you came to writing Darkening Blue, and you were aware that you wanted to work with lyrics. Obviously, there are a lot of great singers working on the London scene. And what was it about Brigitte in particular that you thought, this is the person I want to work with and deal with this whole world of language in music?
I think it's just the simplest way of putting it is that whenever I've heard her sing, I get the impression that she doesn't have any limitations, vocally or musically. So that was kind of like a no-brainer. Because I remember when I first started writing, when I sort of got her involved, and I said, "What's your range?" She said, "Well, it's kind of here, but if I need to, I can sing, and I can go." And in fact, it was actually amazing on the session. We did some doubling up of the vocals on a couple of the tracks, and on Colors, she sings the melody. I don't know if you can really hear it if you focus in though. She's doubling in unison, but she also sings it down in the chorus. She sings it down the octave.
Oh wow!
And wow! So she's got an amazing sort of range, and just musically, vocally, what she can do is just astounding.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So, as we are heading towards the end of our chat and wrapping up, what are your plans for the future? Obviously, things are very uncertain at the moment, and planning, in the midterm is extremely difficult. But musically, are plans for the fifth album even brewing in the back of your head somewhere? Any new projects, or is it a bit of time to step away and have some?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely, obviously, I'm looking forward to the rescheduling of the tour that we're supposed to be on right now, and so I'll be working on that. The worst part as well is, I'm sure you know this. Being both a promoter and a musician, like putting a tour together is just a nightmare. In terms of, well, I guess for some people maybe they've got more time that they can allot to it, but it's a really time-consuming thing, and all the energy it takes to put a tour together that makes sense, and then to have to sort of think that oh god, I have to do this again now. I have to.
Yeah, well, at the very least, you already have the venues,
Yeah,
we got the venues. Well, you got the funding. So
yeah, and I got the funding too, which is, it's amazing. It was actually really, I was really surprised at the timing, because I had submitted my application for funding kind of on the late side. Like, essentially, I'd submitted it at the point where I probably wouldn't have been able to resubmit had I not been successful the first round. But yeah, whenever that first week of where Boris announced that we're going into lockdown, I got an email. So was it a Monday that he made it? I can't remember now already. It was like, anyway, it was that same week. It was a couple of days later, I got an email from the Arts Council saying, "You've got funding for this tour." And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then they were like really, they were really on it with, like, they sent another email saying, "Upload your bank details form now," They were really keen to like give the money to me, and I was like, I was great, grateful for it, and I was happy, but at the same time I was a little bit like, well, what do I do? Obviously, and my thought was that, I guess, if I've got the funding, that I just hold on to it until it's all rescheduled. And I'm considering this tour to be postponed, not canceled. And from the advice I've received from the Arts Council, that it kind of goes in line with that. So that seems to be at least a small blessing.
Yeah,
is that even though I have to go through the headache of organizing the tour, at least I know that I've got the funding.
Yeah, exactly. Because normally you start the booking without knowing, which is like
I know. Yeah,
That's something at least. But
and it's going to be. I'm really looking forward to playing this music with the band again. And whether I write new material for this band again, I'm not sure yet. I said I wouldn't do it last time. Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I guess the reason this album came about was because I enjoyed playing with the band so much, and the touring that we'd done just made it seem obvious that we had to do something else. So that may happen again, but who knows? I've been playing with the London Jazz Orchestra for the last couple of years, and I've been asked to write something for them for a big band. I haven't done it yet. I've been putting it off, but that could be potentially something that I might start thinking about as well. As maybe I've always wanted to write a big band album. So
fantastic! Oh yeah, look forward to hearing that. So the London Jazz piece, is that just a sort of, as soon as things are up and running, trying to get doing it on one of the Vortex gigs, or what's the? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and that's the beauty of that band, is that it's kind of like being in a working band that you can try stuff out on. I mean, I can bring it into the rehearsal and say, maybe I don't like this, or I like this, or this needs tweaking. I can take it home, fix it, and bring it into the next rehearsal, and then we can do it on a gig. And it's constantly, like some of the people that write for that band quite regularly are always changing things. Like we'll play it 1 month, we'll play one of their pieces, and then next time we play that same chart, they'll have handed us new parts because they changed something. I think that's a beautiful thing about being in a group like that.
Yeah, there's not many big.
I think it's more like one of those things where and before this all happened in normal life, you're sort of busy with things and you keep putting it off. And then now I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, God, what an advantage. I think, it's going to inspire me when everything gets back to normal to kind of get on the case of things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And with that in mind, then, as with everyone else, I'm asking, what are your top tips for surviving lockdown? What's been floating your boat or keeping you sane or whatever?
Well, I mean, getting out of the house every single day to do some exercise. I mean, I'm an avid cyclist, so I and obviously being sort of trapped in my house, teaching trumpet lessons through an iPad is a little bit, it's great that I can still do that, but by the end of the day, I'm just, my eyes are glazed over and my legs are stiff, and it's been, I think the thing that's been keeping me sane is the fact that I just get on my bike, go ride as fast as I can for an hour, and come back, and then I'm ready for a beer and do it all over again. It's like Groundhog Day, but isn't it?
Perfect. Well, listen, I'll let you get off on your bike ride now and stretch your legs and breathe the fresh air. Yeah. Andre, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and we hope to have you up at the Whiskey Jar, as soon as possible, certainly. So
yeah, me too. Can't wait.
Thanks so much, man. Take care. All the best.
Yeah, you too. See you soon.
Like the others at the table, but on second glance she seemed to hold her card a little differently as she picked it up. She smiled once, it was almost painful, and when they finished it was time to stand, and slowly chance selected them, they left and moved through many rooms. They talked and laughed. I saw her, she was moving far behind. Obstacle in the way, and yet as though once it was overcome, she would be beyond the walking and would
Hello again, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in today and listen to the podcast with Andre. Huge thanks to Andre, of course, for his time and musicianship. Please go and check out his new album Ghost Days out on Whirlwind Recordings. You can, of course, find that via his Bandcamp and various other places online. Please also head over to patreon.com/NQJazz if you'd like to support what we do and check out our full programme, the fantastic concerts, the rest of our podcasts, and also our silent film and soundtrack series. Take care, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.